Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of What Do You Do podcast. My name is JJ Vola. Alongside my co-host is Cal Vola. Today we have a special guest. But first off, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone with your love and support and sharing the videos, liking the video. Just want to get some feedback from you guys as to what you'd like to see in future episodes, like such as different jobs, careers. Just because we want to dive into as many careers as possible to help inspire everyone that's watching or listening to this podcast. So I just want to say a huge thank you. But today we have a special guest and we're going to let him introduce himself.
How's it going, guys? My name's Jeffrey Merkel. I'm an artist also known by the name of McClure. Yeah, I'm kind of like a Renaissance man, if you will. I do a lot of different things. I don't have one career. I have honestly at this point 4 different weird careers. I'm very millennial in that sense. So
cool.
We can get into that, but that's basically what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Just quickly, where did you grow up? What schools did you go to? Did you have any college or university education that you went with?
I was born in the GTA. When I was a kid, my family moved approximately every 2 years for my whole childhood. We ended up back in the GTA when I was 14. We lived all over the world in my childhood, and we ended up back in the GTA. I spent the remainder of my life here, so I've been here for the last 15 years. I went to the high school in the suburbs. I spent some time living in Hamilton. I've been living in Toronto for the past 4 years, and probably will remain there until I have a lot of money, and then probably leave.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. Was there anything when you were younger that you wanted to do? Any dreams, aspiration at a younger age?
Not at all. I was a complete degenerate as a child, as a kid. I had dreams as a small kid before my will and my sort of spirit was broken. When I was 10, 11, I remember I wanted to be theatrical. I wanted to be a performer. I always wanted to perform for people and show myself to the world and give my heart out and be on stage, literally. As a teenager, I was definitely spiritually destroyed. I don't know, for many reasons. I was probably primarily responsible, but drugs and everything like that. And honestly, from probably grade 9 onwards, there was no career aspirations. I was trying to survive half the time and wanted to die the other half. You know what I mean? Right. It was pretty bad. So I came out of high school, just barely graduated. My parents kind of just somehow got me through it. And then I went to university for 1 semester, dropped out. I went into it because basically I was told that was the right path for me. It was never the right path for me. I have ADD. Schooling, being in a schooling environment was always the worst possible place for me.
So you went to university. What was the course that you went for?
I went for engineering, which is the polar opposite of my character and my inner person. Sure. Right. I was going running exactly against who I was. Both my brothers are engineers now, and my father was an engineer as well. So it was that environment. It was what was expected of me, sort of, but It never made sense for me. I was the black sheep in that regard. I was just not mathematically minded. I just never did well in that kind of setting. Right. So basically I dropped out and decided to become a rapper.
Cool.
At that time, I was still involved in a ton of strife. I was selling drugs, doing drugs. My life was a mess, man. So I had no idea what I was doing with my life. I had the dream of being a rapper, right? I wanted to be an artist, but my art was garbage because I was a loser drug addict. I wasn't able to even barely produce any art because I was a loser drug addict. You know what I mean? So I was lying to myself on all fronts, and it took a lot of years to recover. But yeah, that was my education. Cool. Sure. You know what I mean? Yeah. Failure was my education.
For sure. And I'm sure you felt like you had to go in to be an engineer because of just your father or your brothers or whatever the case is, right? So you felt like that was your path. I'm sure probably at a younger age, right? And then you feel like it's not for you, and then you want to go do something else, right?
Yeah, man. It never felt right in my heart, but there was a lot of pressure to be that guy. You know what I mean? And it took a lot of time for me to accept that it wasn't me. You know?
Sure. And how old were you at that time, kind of going through university, leaving after the first year?
So that was at age 19.
19, okay.
Yeah.
When you went to be a rapper after school, what was the next steps after kind of leaving being an engineer?
So basically I spent the next 2 years in a spiritual battle, trying to not kill myself. I was extremely depressed. I hated my life. Like I said, I was trying to be a rapper, but I wasn't really trying. I didn't put any effort into anything. I was extremely lazy, extremely arrogant. My whole entire life was centered around vices and sin. Anyways, so those next few years were really bad. I slowly pulled myself out of like that hole, right? Selling drugs was like that lasted for years. Mm-hmm. That was probably one of the more harmful things that it took me a long time to consider how much damage I was doing to people and myself by participating in that. So that was the next few years. Then my life really started when I was able to kind of really put like an end to that.
Right. So how do you get yourself out of that? That vicious circle sort of thing. I mean, so many people probably go through it. Mm-hmm. I mean, they've been selling drugs, doing drugs, all that kind of stuff, drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
How do you get out?
It's absolutely a choice, and it's 100% yours every single time. Yeah, it's funny now because now that I'm fully out of it, and I just recently, now I'm stripping away more and more vices from my life, right? I'm 30 now, and more things that I was addicted to, I'm taking away from myself. And the more I do it, the more I realize that it's actually not that hard. You just don't want to give it up, so you don't. Right. I convinced myself that I wanted to quit doing all of these debaucherous things for years. In my head, in my mind, I was convinced that I wanted to stop, but I didn't want to stop, and that's why I didn't stop. It's as simple as that. If you're not stopping, it's because you don't want to. It's actually not hard to stop. I know it's probably really frustrating for some people to hear that, but once you do actually stop in earnest, you realize it was never hard. You just didn't want to, and ultimately you made a choice every time you got high or you did this or that. I know that's probably annoying advice, but ultimately you have to take responsibility for your actions. You have to be willing to suffer, and if you're not willing to go through the pain of sobriety, of not having anything, being broke, if you're not willing to go through that pain, then unfortunately you're not ready.
Now after that, what was your first job or series of jobs that you kind of gone through into today's path?
Yeah. So, I mean, luckily I got, I had a few jobs as a kid, as a teenager. I wasn't totally, completely out of, control. When I was in my early 20s, a couple of years, I sustained myself by selling drugs. But after a couple of years of it, at a certain point, I realized, I had to get a legit job, partly because I wasn't even a good drug dealer, dude. I sucked at it. I didn't even make much money. I was broke. Right. It was I was living in such a pathetic place, right? But I started working jobs that were super basic, right? Temp jobs, factories, warehouses, something I think most men that I guess at least at some point were blue collar have experienced, right? On a line, assembling the dashboard for a truck or whatever, 8 hours a day. Yeah, so I did that for a while, and then my life really changed when I got a job in a kitchen, because I was 23 at that time when I got my first job in a kitchen, and immediately I had this passion, right? I was online, I was a line cook, and within 5 minutes I was enjoying myself. And I realized that you can actually enjoy work.
Right.
My whole life before that, I was work is this thing you have to do and you suffer through it. Mm-hmm. And then I was oh, I love this. And immediately, because I enjoyed it, for the first time, I enjoyed doing something I was getting paid for. I threw my whole life at it, and I was this is literally what I have to do now. And that was it. I completely just jumped at it because I knew that it was the one opportunity for me to do something that I enjoyed and maybe build something out of it. Yeah. My only advice to anyone who wants to do that now is don't do it. If you're going to try and be a cook, don't do that. Find something else you'll enjoy. My biggest mistake there is I should have realized, I can enjoy this. That means I could enjoy any other kind of work. And then I should have tried and found something else because it's a horrible career path to go into.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's absolutely horrendous.
Just cutthroat or just?
Not so much cutthroat. Just I could go into many, many reasons, but number one, the pay is trash. If you become a really top tier chef, your pay's still not even that good. It's still It's okay, it's livable. Right. And we're talking one top 5%, let's say.
Okay. Right.
Okay, so the bottom 95%, if you're in that, you're making trash money. The second thing, you're constantly surrounded by your coworkers. Most of them, they don't care about cooking. Mm-hmm. They're there because it's a bottom of the barrel job. And it's unfortunate that that's the truth, but being a line cook is not a passion for most people. It's a way for them to make money, right? It's not one of those jobs where everyone you meet is like super passionate about it.
Yeah.
Right.
And most of those people, honestly, most people you're going to find in that industry, they don't really care about what they're doing. That might be true for most industries, but the problem with this one specifically is then you're surrounded constantly by drugs and alcohol. Especially alcohol, right? You work at restaurants, you're probably working at a bar. It's such a savage work environment, and so it takes such a toll on your mind and soul, even if you love it, that typically people who end up in that line of work, they cope through alcoholism. I would say the vast majority of line cooks I work with were addicts.
Right.
And they were not able to cope in a healthy way with how hard their job and their life was. And all those things kind of line up, and you end up in this world where it's okay to like drink every single night.
Right.
And there's a lot of like, it's easy to end up in this myopic space in life where like you're surrounded by like-minded people, and you don't realize there's a whole world out there of people who are doing things that have different careers, and they're not going out and drinking every night, and they're not involved in like this kind of like insane lifestyle where you just hammer yourself into the ground every day. Right. So yeah. No,
well, I mean, it's a fair point to make. I'm sure you went through it personally, right? So you have a great experience from that. Now, after kind of going from doing that, like you enjoyed it your first little bit, kind of sounded like you didn't really like it as you kind of got into it. Was there like a passion that you left?
So I still have a lot of passion for cooking, but I think it's more the creative aspect of it. It took me a long time to realize that ultimately, like my life is about creative pursuits. I like being creative. I like creating. That's like my endeavor. Like, I think I like being like a visionary, obviously that's like a bold thing to say, whatever. Like you could just call me a creative or something like that. If I don't want to sound egotistical, but I think that like artistically, like I'm good at executing a vision, and that's why I was successful as a chef. I have a restaurant now, and I stay away from it as much as I possibly can. I like essentially treat it like a passion project that like kind of pays my bills sometimes. It runs itself now, right? I have a great team, and I'm super grateful for that. And now I can focus on the actual fun part of it, which is creating menus, and that's like where I shine because it's the creative process, right?
So you own a restaurant.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you after you were cooking yourself? How did you transition into getting that business or buying the business, and what's the name of the restaurant?
Yeah, so I turned my life around that time, right? Like when I started working in restaurants, it really was a very quick turnaround because finally I had something I enjoyed, and I no longer was like, oh, I want to get effed up all the time. I want to get high. I want to do this and that. Like finally I had a passion to focus on. I really, really moved a lot of distance in a short period of time. I wasn't sober at the time, but I cut out drugs completely at least. So I was drinking, but it wasn't out of control. And, I was still coping, but I did a lot better. Essentially, like I made strides, within like, I want to say 6 months or less of starting. I ended up, climbing the ladder in the business, partly because most people don't care. Mm-hmm. And I ended up as sous chef at the restaurant I was working at, which was like, I felt super accomplished, right?
Sure.
And then basically I'm privileged and I'm lucky because I basically, at that time, my mom was like, okay, you finally found something that you enjoy doing. Let me help you start a business. And then so she helped me start a business. I put all my money into it. She gave me some money, and I started a food truck.
Cool. No way. That's awesome, man.
Yeah. So the food truck was even more hellish than working in a normal kitchen. But I mean, like, but again, I don't want to sound like, I didn't value these experiences. Like it was super fun, especially because I was in a position where like I owned the business, right? So I started that food truck, and I did that for 3 years. Turbulent times, very hard, almost failed, did fail multiple times, really. But I was able to keep it afloat, so to speak, and like not go bankrupt for like 3 years. The third summer was successful. I took all that money, flipped it into finding a lease on a restaurant, and immediately then I opened the restaurant. So I've had that ever since, and it's called Hawker in Toronto.
Hawker.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Hawker.
That's correct. Most people misspell it. I'm glad you got it right. Yeah, it's so a hawker is actually a word that it basically means like in like Southeast Asia, they have food stalls and stuff like that, or on the street they'll have like another more derogatory term for it is peddler. Like someone who will try to sell you something by chanting or yelling at you, trying to get your attention. No way. So I lived in Singapore as a kid. Like I said, I moved around a lot. Mm-hmm. So when I was a kid, I lived in Singapore, and like I think my passion for food and love for it came from living there and going to places they call hawkers centers, which is basically like a food court, but a little more exciting. And the food there is like crazy, and it's something you'll probably never have here. So yeah, that kind of stuck with me, right? That's why I called it Restaurant Hawker.
Cool.
That's awesome.
And what kind of genre of food is it?
So it's in line with the kind of South Asian palate. The biggest influence is South Asian cuisine, Indian being the primary one, but basically, I mean, the biggest reason for that is because I've been vegan for 10 years. Okay. So, and I grew up eating South Asian cuisine. So like those two things match together, and it's like, well, you know, half of India's food is already vegetarian or vegan. If you take influences from that and you tweak it a little bit, you can come up with some exciting stuff. And I think that most vegan Americanized cuisine is super, just like it's off the mark. You know what I mean? Trying to recreate meat is like an impossible game, and usually is disgusting to me. You know what I mean? Like it's like this like soy sausage stuff is like super, like no one likes it. Everyone hates it. You know what I mean? So right. I try to go and just focus on plants, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if somebody out there is listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube and they're like, man, I've always had this dream of opening a food truck.
Don't do it.
Don't.
No, like
the dreams are there, now they're gone.
I'm super dead serious. Do not open a food truck. Now, if you insist on opening a restaurant, if you insist on being in the culinary industry in hospitality,
sure.
First of all, you're going to make huge sacrifices. And everyone told me this and I didn't listen, right? Because of my arrogance, which is fine. And I know like if someone watches this and they're like me 6 years ago, they'll say, yeah, I know I'm making these sacrifices and I'm willing to do so. It's like, okay, first of all, please, for me, just take a month and try and find something else that's worthwhile that you can actually make money doing and isn't going to blow your freaking bones in half over a 5-year course and you're going to have to retire.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you're not willing to do that and you just have to pursue this passion, do you? I know you're unstoppable just like I was. Okay. But don't start a food truck. Just go straight to the restaurant.
Sure.
Like maybe if you're in California or Miami or something like that where the weather's good all year round, maybe. But I'm telling you, the complications of having an irregular schedule and all of the other complications that come with a mobile kitchen, I don't think it's ever worth it. Why wouldn't you want a place that you like is just stationary? You can attract the same customer base all the time. It's like the business model of food truck is just insane to me. Like, I don't know, like I did it because, you know, it's seen as that kind of like, it's that dream. Like, I don't know, like, you know, people romanticize it, but dude, you want to be in a steel box for 12 hours straight, cooking over a flat top.
Sure.
Right.
You want to do that?
It sounds exciting.
Dude, you don't want to do that. Anyways, like that's my take on that.
Yeah.
What was the worst part of it? Like you're just like, man, this is absolutely brutal. Like,
I mean, listen, I'm definitely the biggest like fool as far as like starting food trucks, because if you're gonna start a food truck, you should never do it in Canada, and you should never do it in the Toronto area, which is probably the worst place in Canada to do it. Yeah. So we already got like a half the year winter, so you essentially can't operate half the year, and we also have in Toronto, like basically the worst, like the most bureaucratic state machinery, right? So essentially doing anything on a food truck in Toronto is like already illegal. They basically don't open any doors for you. They make it really hard. So I actually ended up in Hamilton most of the time because here...
We have a really big community for food trucks.
So here was great. Yeah. Here was great. This is where I made my money.
Okay.
Like I was not able to make money in Toronto because you can't park up anywhere. They don't let you. If you do it, you're going to get a huge ticket. They only issue a few licenses a year, all this kind of thing, right? So it was really, really hard in Toronto, but Hamilton was a little more forgiving, and I did make a little bit of money here. So.
Sure. And it seems like most people that have food trucks, they aspire to have their stationary restaurant.
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
Can drive traffic to, and
right, 100%. And that was the same thing for me. I started the food truck because I thought it was going to be an easier kind of stepping stone. But in reality, I actually opened the restaurant for less money than I did the food truck.
Wow. Wow.
And
that's probably a perception that people have is it's cheaper,
right.
It's easier to get into the industry sort of thing.
Absolutely not. It's a false perception, and I totally thought that. The food truck was more expensive to start. The restaurant, listen, I I really was like unstoppable, and like when I have a goal in mind, like typically historically, especially for the last 5 years, like I'll just make it happen, right? I started the restaurant with $10,000. I started a restaurant. I maxed my credit card out, so that was probably another $6K. I never had to miss a payment on it. Like the reason is you have to wait for the right opportunity. People burn life savings on restaurants all the time because they're like, they don't understand that everyone else is doing that. So there's constantly a turnover, and there's constantly restaurants that are out of business. And when people walk away from a restaurant, oftentimes it's a passion project and they're willing to just accept the losses. We're opening a studio now. I saw a closed restaurant, and they're letting, like, there's all this equipment in there that cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. Hood vents cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to install. You can just find a place like that. They'll let you have the equipment for next to nothing because they lost. They already lost, and they accept the losses. They're not going to nickel and dime you on the refrigerator. And once that hood vent's already there and you already have everything, safety, whatever, is like ready to go by the government, you can get in there cheap. You're going to have first and last money for renovations, you know, here and there, blah, blah, blah. But you're not going to need to have hundreds of thousands to start something from scratch. So I would definitely recommend being very careful and just picking and choosing. I basically took over a space that failed, and I did it for almost free.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a great idea too, because I'm sure a lot of people invest $100,000 to $500,000 just on equipment, new appliances, new everything, because they want the best of the best for their first opening day, right?
I get that. I understand that perspective and that mentality. I definitely didn't have the best of the best. The place was a freaking hole in the wall, and it looked like trash, honestly, for the first summer. But I made good money. People didn't care. The food slapped, right? Like that's what it was. Like, so yeah, if you're going to, you know, basically commit your life to being financially strained forever, you're going to commit your life to long hours, constant issues, impossible staffing, and you want to open a restaurant, at least don't invest your life savings in it. Like, go easy, start small, and build, you know what I mean? And also, the other biggest piece of advice I would have for entrepreneurs, and I say this to kind of counter the narrative I was always told. Everyone always told me when I started my business, oh, you got to keep 100% ownership. Never partner with anybody. That's going to cause problems. It's like a marriage. You guys could break up. It'll ruin the business. Guys, I can't tell you how much easier it is to run a business with a partner. It's not twice as easy. It's 10 times easier.
Right. Sure.
I run my restaurant with a partner now, and it's 10 times easier. That's why I'll never start a business alone again, ever. I'm going to always have a partner because my strengths and their strengths can combine. So it's not just twice as easy. It's literally 10 times as easy and 10 times as viable. So,
and that's how I felt too about the podcast. Originally, I wanted to do it all by myself. Like, it was originally a mindset, a goal, idea, you know, and then it was like, well, you know, I think it'd be good to have a second person, not only just the bantering back and forth between Cal and I, whatever the case is, but even just the things that Cal's brings to the table to that exact point. So, I mean, I learned quickly by bringing on Cal as the co-host how much easier and how much better the podcast is going to be. So,
and another piece to that too is making sure that you find the right partner.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's huge too. Yeah. Don't pick the wrong person. I'm not advocating that. You got to be very careful about who you choose. Their strengths and weaknesses have to complement yours. You can't both be of the same mind, right? I'm an entrepreneur and have been for a long time, but I'm not necessarily the business-minded guy. Like I said, with numbers and everything like that, it hurts my brain. I like creative stuff, and I think that I can create spaces, products, ideas, art that inspire people and make people want it, right? But I need the salesman. Yeah. So now every business I start, I'm going to start it with someone who's business minded with a salesman thing. I'm the more visionary type, the creative type. They're the more like, okay, now I just need eyes on this, right? Because if someone gets eyes on my thing, I know it's going to shine, right? Because I know I can create, and they can get eyes on it. And that's what's necessary as an artist. We always expect our creations to just like be good enough to be seen automatically. No one cares what you're doing. You need to shove it in their faces. And it's easier actually to have someone shove your art into someone else's face because they're not so emotionally attached to it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So because obviously like you go and put all your time into something and create it, like this podcast, right? Yeah. It's hard. You're putting yourself out there. You're like, we're in this room now showing the world, and you guys are saying, hey world, this is the best I can do. Right. You know what I mean? And that's like, it's like being naked. It's like one of those dreams where you're, you know what I mean? Yeah. You're so scared that people are going to be like, this is trash. So it's easier when you have someone that's like, okay, I believe in this, and you're like, okay, so the burden's not on me always. You know what I mean? So yeah.
And just having that person you can call up and be like, hey, man, like, I'm not too sure about this. This is scary as hell. And then they're reinforcing, you know what, man, don't worry about it. Like, we'll take it day by day, one step at a time.
Yes.
And work it out,
Accountability.
And Rome wasn't built in a day. And that's a huge
100%.
thing, and not overthinking things, because people with ADHD are like, we get in our minds and you overthink things and you got a million things going off all one time. And you're like, how do we focus these ideas and find the right people to work with and make things happen? So it feels like you have a great handle on that. So
yeah, it's definitely like one of the biggest things is in that, like, that I've realized and has changed my life over the past, I want to say 6 months, is right in that arena. It's accountability, right? Because you guys are accountable to each other now, right? You can't just be like, I'm not going to release the episode this week and no one's going to notice and no one's going to care. Well, no, that's not happening. You know what I mean? Sure. You guys are going to hold each other accountable, and that's the hugest thing, man. Like, it's hard to hold yourself accountable. We all want to get there, but it's when you start with someone else holding you accountable, and that's why Jesse and I, like, he's literally brought me from here to here, because having a friend that's going to hold you accountable and not take your BS excuses about, like, oh, I'm too scared to go to the gym. I'm too scared to whatever it is. It's so important, man. It'll change your entire life. You need someone on your team, and by on your team, I mean willing to actually call you out when you're being a loser, like when you're just like when you're giving up on your goals. And that whole thing for me, combine that with creative energy, and you're unstoppable. Cool. And when I say creative energy, I mean you have to create and put it out. And that's the other thing that changed my life. I remember I write lyrics, and I was singing these lyrics to my friend, and it was something about, like, it seems like there's a lot of creatives but not a lot of creators. That was the lyric, right? And I thought it was a cool bar or whatever, right? I was like, this is a cool bar. Yeah. He freaked out. Like, he hit the roof. He was like, oh my God, what? And then that made me, like, kind of freak out. I was like, yo, you're right. That was hard. And we talked about it. And this conversation, like, I can't forget it. It's stuck in my mind. And that's why we decided to do the one music video every week.
Right.
We promised ourselves we will release a music video every week, even if at the end of the week, when the week's over, if that edit looks like trash and I hate the song, guess what? I'm putting it out.
Right.
Too bad. We're accountable now, so
and just so everyone knows who Jesse is, Jesse was on our podcast last week, your business partner, and obviously we talked about the adventures that you guys are getting into, getting a new studio and all that stuff. So now, just to kind of dive into your, you being a rapper and looking at what the next steps are going to be for you and Jesse's journey. How does that look like?
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, like, I'm on purpose more than ever. I'm on mission more than ever. And what that means is I need to, just basically keep pushing in every regard. And it really goes back to what I just said about being a creator, not a creative.
Yeah.
You can't just sit. And I spent many years sitting and creating, but never saw the light of day because I was too scared. So really, ultimately, everything I did was a hobby, which is fine. Sure. And that got me here to where I'm like, you know what? I'm good enough now that I'm not as scared anymore, and I don't think I'm going to get laughed at, and I don't think 5 years down the line I'm going to hate myself for releasing it. So yeah, Jesse and I both have the same mentality. Essentially, everything that we do, it has to be like a push towards the next step, and it can't be just like this sort of activity we do for fun, and it can be a lot of fun. So that's why I think it was so easy for us. I think committing to the one music video a week, it changed our lives so much, because I think it made it so easy to say, oh, we can actually do anything if we just promise ourselves we're not gonna not do it.
Right.
Once you speak it, it has to become reality. And if you speak things into reality for a month, which I've done now, I've done it for about 90 days now. If you only say things that you will follow through on, then the next time you say something, you're a little more confident about following through on it. You feel like less of a coward, less of a liar, less of a loser. Sure. And I mean, like, the idea of us starting the studio together 2 months ago was not even a concept. It had not even been thought of. And now it's like we get the keys today. You know what I mean? It was so fast. it was so fast, and it always can be that fast. And it's like seeing life this way. It's like, oh, I see so much bounty for us. I see like everything we ever dreamed of right in front of us. We just simply have to walk towards it, and that's it, and not stop walking. Like that's it. You just can't stop. You know.
Sure.
Yeah.
And just to break down into like what. For people that are going to be going onto the studio, like obviously you're going to be essentially renting out the space, right?
Yeah. So it's a production facility for people who want to do videography, film, or sort of like any social media content. We basically are providing you with a professional space and film sets, micro film sets, if you will.
Right.
So essentially rooms like this size, maybe some of them are smaller, some of them are a bit larger, but we stylize them in a way that like looks interesting and cool to the eye. So you could use it in, let's say, a rap video, or you could use it in a video that's a sad song, and it's, you step in that room, you put a camera up, it's going to look crazy cool. You know what I mean? We're talking about like weird visuals, colors, aesthetics, textures, right?
Sure.
And we're going to be attracting clientele that are influencers. Yeah, anyone who's trying to create just content that's going to be a little like, just if they want a space for it, that's going to look cool. Basically, that's what we're providing.
And I'm sure it's beneficial for a lot of people, because if they don't have that, they got to go look for a space, reno itself, pay for all the costs, then just hopefully for a 10-minute video.
Well, yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, like when you look at high level people that are influencers or content creators, like, listen, man, like if you want to have a cool background for your video, like, what's the most efficient way to do that? Pay someone $150 an hour for 2 hours to make your video, and then all of a sudden it's like that space was yours, that cool room that's got polka dots all over the wall, and your chair looks like it's part of the background. Oh, like that just made your video eye-grabbing. It has more retention now, and it cost you $300. You can't make that yourself for $300. It costs you $3,000. You know what I mean? Especially if you live in Toronto and you don't have a spare room like most people. Sure. And the great thing is, I think this market is exploding right now. And I think people who make $0 off of their social media endeavors or their music are still willing to put a lot of money into it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because I'm one of those people.
They want to invest in themselves,
100%.
And, I mean, this platform is growing at like crazy rates and whatnot. And I mean, there's a lot of podcasts happening, a lot of social media influencers and whatnot. And, for spaces like that, like it's so cool to even just come in, meet you guys, say, hey, this is what I want to do. Maybe I don't have a budget for it right now, but like, just check it out, see what it's all about. And then, okay, you know what? This is the spot I want to do it at. Let's put some money together, get some people together, and then go and shoot those videos. So
yeah, absolutely. I think it makes things achievable for people that they might never have thought of. I mean, like, for example, when we started doing the music videos, I didn't really know that there was like these cool spaces that are for rent on an hourly basis in Toronto that look theatrical, or they look like a really well curated apartment, and I can go and I can film in there for $150, $200, whatever. It's like, that's a game changer. You know what I mean? Because that's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, especially for someone who's already making money from there.
And even for someone like, they have an idea, they're like, oh man, I really want to do this, but like they can't really visualize it until they get in the room. They see like the background, what you guys have kind of built and customized and made it look really cool, and they can see themselves in that room producing that content, sort of thing. And it's great that you guys are doing this. I think a lot of people are gonna come out and see you guys. So what's it called again?
It's called Eros Studios.
Eros Studios.
Yes. Now, do you have an idea of what you're going to be charging per hour? I guess it's probably different per the setup.
Yeah.
And what they're getting.
So it's right now. It's we're gonna start at a rate of 150, and that's like super low. But we're gonna just start at that, and we're gonna see how the market takes it. We also want to get a lot of people in early, you know what I mean? Just to kind of get more of the word out there. So we're going to start low, and then we're probably going to, I think a more appropriate price per hour would be at least around the $250 an hour range. And then we'll have like reduced day rates to take the whole place for yourself. If for people who are doing like a larger production, they want to be in there 8 hours. Sure. So yeah, I mean, like the range is pretty big, but what we're doing is probably in that 150, 250 an hour kind of zone.
Builds a nice client base, right? People got to start to know what you do, referring. I'm sure a lot of it's word of mouth too. Once you find somebody who's already a creator, they already know other creators. right? So
exactly,
they're gonna bring you in, and for you too, I'm sure even for a lot of people in Toronto, right, to living in condos, apartments, or the cases, they just don't have the space, right? Like for a lot of people that might already know, like we're in the basement of my house, right? Like that's the cool part. A lot of people don't have this space, so the fact that you guys are able to do that for people just to show up, hit record, and go.
Yeah, it's a game changer, and it was for me, and that's I really think what helped it click for me is like, I was the consumer, and I was so happy with this product, and it made so much sense for me as a creator to go and pay someone to use their beautifully curated space.
Cool.
Because I have a 2-bedroom in Toronto, and I turned my second bedroom into I try to use it as my like mini studio, but then I'm like, it costs me a lot to change this over to something new every time. It actually costs me less to just rent the space from someone else, because there's countless, you know what I mean? So our studio is going to we're starting with 13 different sets. So in theory, one person could use it 13 times for 13 different videos. You know what I mean? Wow. And still not run out. And if a year passes in that time, we'll probably flip over at least half of those rooms into something new, because it doesn't cost a ton to just be like, oh, you know what? People don't like this blue room that much. It's not getting much usage. Let's just flip it, change the color, do something different, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome, man. So you guys are doing the studio space, which is awesome. So you're going all in on media. You're really going to try and push all that kind of stuff. Obviously, you still have the restaurant. But, I mean, you're rapping too. So any, like, events coming up or anything like that you might be getting involved with? Or
not yet. We're basically, we've if essentially my career has done a cold launch over the past few months. We've put nothing into marketing, advertising, anything like that. That's our next stage. Sure. We wanted to have a catalog first. So basically now I just released my my first album a few days ago. It dropped. So now it's like, okay, now it's looking like the time where it's time to start putting money into getting people's eyes on the content, because no matter how good something is, typically I think that's a good idea. You have to be tastefully done. But so that's kind of the next step. I haven't planned any shows or anything like that. I've been a firm believer for a long time now that if you're trying to make it as an artist, doing things in person, live events, doing shows, listen, this is a bold take. A lot of people have like told me I'm an idiot for it. I think it's a complete waste of your time, resources, and money. I think unless you're already getting paid a reasonable amount for your sets, which most artists aren't, especially rappers, they're doing it for free, right? In fact, some people pay money to play at shows. Wow. Like, you're paying someone to be the entertainer. Like, it's humiliating, right? I think that the best use of your time, energy, and resources is to really, really hone in on your content online. Use all the apps. And this is coming from someone who has zero success in the industry, right? So don't really take my advice, I guess. I should probably shut up. But
you're also learning too, right?
But you know what? Like, we'll see. Like 6 months or a year from now, history will record whether I was correct or not, and maybe I was dead wrong. Maybe I'm right. But that's basically my business plan in a sense. I think for a while now I've been treating the music like a business. I just see it as one of my businesses. I have to produce this amount of content. I have to do these things. This is my list of things to do, and this is my business plan, right? It's like my business plan just doesn't include like live events at this time. It's just like, okay, let's focus on trying to gain a digital following first, because I think that's where you build off personally.
So focus on the craft, really try and make it as good as you possibly can, sort of thing. And I think that's what gets lost too, and like a lot of artists, is that they start trying to do shows kind of right off the hop. They drop their first album or first songs. They try and travel around, do tours and whatnot, but they haven't put the time into like really articulating what they want to say through their music and whatnot. So
absolutely. And I think for me, like, I do think that one thing that I've seen recently, just because I get fed a lot of content on how to be successful as a creator, because the algos know that I'm creating content and I'm trying to be successful as a creator. And one thing that I've heard a lot is that whole thing of it took me 10 years to be an overnight success, right? And we always see these people blowing up overnight, but the large majority of them, they did not just pick up a guitar, sing a song last night, and they said, "Oh, this is good," and then all of a sudden they're famous. If you're good at music, I firmly believe it's extremely rare that you have like such a well of raw talent and taste that like you just in your first year of creating, it was like boom. I think there's a lot of training involved. I think there's a lot of effort involved. I've been doing it for many years, and like the progress I've made has been crazy. Again, this is coming from someone with zero following, but I think it's still valid to say like you do need to hone your craft first. I mean, that was true for all of my business pursuits. You know what I mean? Right. And music is no different. You have to be good first. And if you like going on tour, like that takes all of your effort, time, resources. I just think it's a poor place to put your time unless you're making a ton of money off it. If you're already have the following to make money touring, then yeah, like, hell yeah, go touring, get your bag, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So if you had someone out there that's like, hey man, like I've always wanted to be a rapper or just any artist in the space sort of thing, and they're like, hey, you know, I'm scared, like I don't want to go out, I don't want to, you know, do all these things. Like, what's something that you could say to them, maybe that'll get them out of, you know, their basement, writing songs, maybe playing their first.
This is what I would say if I could talk to me as a younger artist. I would say, you're not good. You suck. You suck. You're really bad. Get better and focus all of your energy on getting better, because no one's gonna like what you're putting out. And I think it sucks, man, because most artists, it's really hard. Like, you love what you create sometimes, but sometimes it sucks, you know? Sure. So you need to hone in on that and just become good. And like, you need to really think about whether what you're making is actually tasteful to people and it actually is going to generate an audience, because that's what it's about. The second thing is, I would say authenticity is absolutely the most unrivaled force in this universe. If you are true to yourself, if you actually speak your perspective with validity, with truth, and with integrity, people will be drawn to you. That's happened to me throughout my life. Like I said, I'm not successful in music. My career essentially just launched. But in all other realms, I've realized that authenticity and integrity are the cornerstones of success. If people do not believe you, if they don't believe what you're saying on that song, you're done.
Yeah.
You got to believe it. You know what I mean? So. And
also too, listening to people's feedback too, right? Because I mean, if they're critiquing what it is that they're listening to, you know, it takes a smarter person to take people's comments and not, you know, absorb it in a negative way, but try to turn it into a positive way.
I think that's huge, and that's one thing that I've always. I think I'm on the last legs of my journey in arrogance and pridefulness. Right. I think for most of my life, I was so prideful. And I think that as a child, as a kid, everything I was told was a lie. And I don't mean by society, I mean like in my family life, and I like even by teachers and stuff like that. I think that like I took that to heart so much that I never trusted anyone.
Right. Sure.
And I've always been so stubborn and arrogant and prideful about my own opinion on creations, on what I do. So when people told me their advice, I would be so offended and disgusted that they would have the arrogance, that like they would have the gall to say like what I should be doing with my time and how I should do it. However, listen, a lot of people are going to tell you things that are stupid, but I wish that I had more ability when I was younger to listen, like find someone or multiple people who actually know what they're talking about and listen to them. I always thought like apprenticeship, that kind of thing, like having a mentor, I was like, oh, that's weakness. I'm making myself, I'm building myself from the ground up. And I think that was a huge mistake. And it's ultimately because I was a traumatized, like weak child inside. And I didn't want to be led astray again. I didn't want someone to come. I didn't trust men, period. You know, I hated my dad so much that I didn't trust men. Never felt comfortable ever looking up to a man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And now I'm 30, and for the first time, I'm able to look to men as inspiration, and I'm able to look to them and be like, you know what? You're more successful than me. You have more money than me. You're more in charge of yourself than me. I've failed in all these ways. I need to listen to you, and I need to trust you. So I try to do that more and more. I think that's like one mistake that I made that was huge.
Wow. Cool. Well, I just going to wrap things up here. I just want to say a huge thank you, Jeff, for coming on the show. It's been absolutely amazing hearing your story.
Unreal,
coming from, you know, what sounded like maybe a rocky younger age, right?
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
now going into a huge success, and obviously with you and Jesse having a huge journey ahead of you, which is really cool. Hopefully we get to come down and see the studio and make our own maybe a little podcast there. But
yes, absolutely. Yes.
But thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you to everyone who's listening. One last thing, obviously you kind of already touched on it with saying, if you had to give yourself advice when you were 20. So instead of kind of changing the question, what are some goals that you have in the next 5-10 years?
Goals in the next 5-10 years. I have to remain completely sober-minded. I have to master myself. I think mastering yourself, I really did not value it enough. And ultimately, I've always been a slave to my fear. This is a major realization I had over the last few weeks. It actually completely changed my perspective on life. I'm going through a major transformation right now. I've literally always been a slave to my fear, because when my fear of pain, because I have an immense ocean of pain inside of me, I've always been afraid of it. And whenever it reared its head, I ran every time. Oh, right. And when I was a kid, I ran to weed. When I was a little bit older, I ran to hard drugs. I quit all of those, and then I ran to girls because the only time I felt safe is in a girl's arms. Right. And ultimately, I think, again, I was like a scared child. I wanted a mother figure in a sense, Not really. I don't want to get too Freudian with it.
But feeling vulnerable.
But I was so scared of feeling my pain that I just wanted to be, close to someone. And ultimately, that's healthy and all that, to be close to someone. We should all be close to people. But I was running after it in the least healthy way possible. So I think, right now my biggest goal in life is to absolutely walk into every bit of pain that awaits me, that is inside my soul. And by the grace of God, I will not break.
Cool.
That's my goal. That's my
awesome.
Singular goal.
Love it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Love it. Well, here's the next journey with you and Jesse, and wish you guys all the best. And again, thank you everybody for listening. We will certainly catch you in the next episode, and we'll go from there. Thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.